Okay, Shloshim Yom Kodem HaChag. We started already last week learning the Seder Carbon Pesach, which we recite on Erev Pesach, and it's already the season that we prepare for Pesach. So, if my math skills are doing good, we have 3 Sundays left, and what I hope to do over the next few Sundays. Women are also welcome to come. I think Rabbi Epstein is going to ask them if he wants them to cancel the Tanya class or not. But what I hope to do is today to discuss the laws of Pesach cleaning and preparing for and bedikas chametz and koshering the kitchen, etc. And then following that to talk about the unique circumstance of this year, where Erev Pesach falls on Shabbos and how that affects bedikas chametz and various, the meals of Shabbos that we eat, etc. And then another one reviewing the laws and customs, etc. of the Seder night. So in as part of the 30 days before Pesach, one of the first things that Ramah brings, that's brought in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch right in the beginning, is Mois Chitim, to collect funds and to distribute funds for those people who need financial help for Yom Tov. So something which the Rebbe made a tremendous shturim about, and extended it to be for every Yom Tov, not just for Pesach, but specifically for Pesach. And so reminder for everybody to budget toward that. And if you know anyone who could use some extra funds, please make sure that you let myself or Rabbi Epstein or Yaakov Weingrow, or any of the people who are involved in distributing funds, let them know as soon as possible so that we could prepare appropriately. Related, and I specifically mentioned this because we've sort of gotten out of the habit with COVID, but as Baruch Hashem things are opening up and people are getting vaccinated and whatever the different circumstances are, is inviting guests for Yom Tov, especially after such a long time of isolation, and especially for people who don't have a lot of family or experience making Yom Tov. Look around you, find the people who would appreciate an invitation, and if your COVID standards allow you to host guests in your house, make an extra effort to host guests this year. Another thing which I wanted to mention was selling the chametz. The custom is that we sell the chametz in person by making the Rav a shliach, and you lift the handkerchief, you make a kinyan, and there's a whole procedure. Now, we do have the Mechiras Chametz form on the website, and that is absolutely valid if you just do it on the website. However, the minhag is to do it in person with the Rav. And I emphasize that because, again, it's one of the things which last year, if you recall, the weeks before Pesach were sort of at the height of the lockdown, and going to see anyone in person, especially a rabbi, was considered a mortal danger. But if you are able to see the rabbi in person and make him a kinyan, that is the custom amongst all communities of Israel, and we treat customs in general, and specifically, we've spoken about this in the past, specifically the customs as they relate to Pesach, to be very sacred, and therefore make the effort to go and meet the rabbi in person and make a kinyan and sell the chametz that way. Another thing from last year was that if you bought new utensils last year and had to rely on one of those workarounds that were available so as not to need to tovel them because although there was no access to the mikveh, then make sure that when you unpack your kitchen this year, before you use them even one time, to make sure, first of all, they're thoroughly clean, and then take them to the mikveh. If there's dirt that doesn't come off, if you used it to cook, and it's never, as well as you clean it, it's never going to look brand new. That's fine as long as there's no substance on it. Now, one of the things that the Pasuk mentioned already within the 30 days for Pesach, that we're always mindful that Pesach is coming. So if you're ever dealing with something that chametz might stick to, be aware of it and take care of it right away. And some poskim, also in modern, contemporary poskim, talk about being aware of this when it comes to dry cleaning. That if you dry clean your clothes year round with in the dry cleaners that use starch, then already from now you should ask them to not starch your shirts on nothing like that, because often the starch, I don't know if always or often, whatever, the starch contains chametz. Now there's a mitzvah of a samachta b'chagacha. There's a mitzvah to be happy on Yom Tov. And there's also a mitzvah, it says in Shulchan Aruch, that we don't say kama toirach Pesach. We don't say how difficult, I'm so stressed to prepare for Pesach. I don't know if we're going to hold anyone accountable if they ever complained that it was stressful, but we certainly want to make an effort to prepare accordingly, plan in advance, know first of all, know what you're going to do and what you're not going to do, and know when you're going to do it and how you're going to do it. And the more planned you are, the easier it will be to fulfill these mitzvahs of not talking about that it's difficult to prepare for Pesach and to actually rejoice in Yom Tov, and not to give ourselves, our wives, or our kids trauma that Pesach, instead of being a time of celebration, becomes into this time of OCD, walking on eggshells, and panic. And related is actually just related because if I recall correctly, it says you shouldn't say how difficult Pesach is because it echoes the words of the Rasha, of the four sons. The Rasha, he says, "Oh, what's this all about?" So if you complain, as this is so stressful, then that echoes his words. Another thing which is brought in halacha is not to say that this meat is for Pesach, because we don't want to be in any way, we mentioned this last week, we don't want to be in any way alluding or giving the impression that any meat that we're buying is going to be for the quote Pesach, for the Paschal sacrifice, because it's forbidden to bring a Korban Pesach in the diaspora, and like we discussed a few weeks ago, according to most poskim, it's forbidden to bring a Korban Pesach nowadays, even in Jerusalem. So therefore, we don't say this meat is for Pesach, we say this meat is for Yom Tov. That applies to beef, to lamb, to chicken, to anything, not to fish, but to any types of meat. We say it's for Pesach, Yom Tov. We don't say it's for Pesach. But the Eved, if you did say, "Oh, I bought meat for Pesach," the Alter Rebbe says it's fine. The Alter Rebbe brings a chumrah. We mentioned last week the Korban Pesach can only be from sheep or goats. It can't be from beef. So the Alter Rebbe brings that a chumrah that if you said it's for Pesach, then b'diavad you shouldn't use it. But that chumrah is only if it's lamb or goat meat, not if it's beef or chicken. So, but the Eved, I don't think in America, it's actually in Europe, in England, it's come. We always had lamb meat for Yom Tov. I don't know about goat meat, but lamb meat for kashrus wise, lamb meat is also much better because the issues with glut, with having whole, whatever punctures or issues, wounds on the lungs, are much simpler with lambs than they are with beef. But anyway, but for some reason in the United States, lamb is not as common and it's much more expensive than beef, so it's not so common. So usually that doesn't end up being a problem. Now, we all know that when it comes to Pesach, we do lots of chumras. Pesach is a time of chumras, and at the same time, it's interesting. I listened to just this past week. I listened to shiurim from most of what I'm going to say is actually going to be based on one of those two, and you'll see some areas the two differ. But I listened to shiurim from Rabbi Farkash in Eretz Yisrael, one of the most prominent Chabad Rabbanim today, prominent Rav, recognized beyond Chabad world as well, and also to Rabbi Gedalia Oberlander Monsi. And it's interesting that they both start with this preface to their classes, that we have to know which chumras and which customs are legitimate chumras and which are not. So we have to know what's obligation, what's customary in a chumrah, and what things are things that people do, which there's absolutely no need for it. And, there's nothing wrong with doing it, but you should know that this is not part of Pesach cleaning. This is spring cleaning, and you have to decide, can I afford the time and effort to do this now? So, for example, if you want to clean anything that you sell to a guy, and the Chabad custom is very strongly that we sell to a guy, even real chametz, not, we don't get rid of anything we sell to a guy, we're perfectly comfortable with that. So there's no need to clean out your kitchen cabinets. You're closing them off and selling them to a guy. Now, if you want to once a year clean out your kitchen cabinets and you choose to do it before Pesach, that's fine. But just know that that's nothing to do with Pesach cleaning, and you can do that any other time of the year. And just know what you're doing, what you're not doing. Okay, so the basic principle, and we're going to go through various applications of it, but the basic principle is that, yes.
Other than a basic cleaning of your kitchen cabinets, if you're cleaning them out because you are moving out the limits and you're planning on putting basic items in there, whether it be catering or food, okay, is there anything special other than a basic cleaning?
We'll get to that. So the basic principle of all, what do we consider, quote, a legitimate chumrah and what is not, is, and this is already mentioned by the Torah. The Torah brings in the name of his father, the Rosh Yisrael Kedoshim, that we do things even that we're not obligated to do. The basic principle is that all chumras are only, quote, valid when they have to do with eating. If there's any concern, even the most remote possible concern, that this will affect the food that we imbibe on Pesach, then it's a legitimate chumrah. So just for a basic example, there's absolutely no reason in the world to scrub the walls of your basement because nobody's touching or eating or coming anywhere near that. But it is customary to clean thoroughly all the chairs that you're going to use on Pesach, even though you don't eat your chairs. But you may, during the meal, sort of touch the leg, and who knows if maybe there's a piece of crumb stuck under there, your kids are crawling under the table. Sometimes you may find if you have those tables that extend in the tracks, the kid went there and he was holding a piece of challah and then he got into a fight and he stuck a piece of challah there. So those are the type of things where, again, strictly speaking, what Sisun may not be necessary, but certainly the chumrah is that anything that is to do with the dining room, living room, kitchen area, that's where we apply all our OCD in preparing for Pesach. The Sefer Chinuch says that one of the reasons for the mitzvah of Simchas Yom Tov is because everybody needs to, have a healthy let out and celebrate and be happy and drink and be merry. So the Torah gives us a holy framework with which to do it. So maybe part of these chumras is a holy framework for us to express our OCD. Anyway, what? The reason I believe the reason why people are careful about clothing starch is because you eat wearing your clothes. You put your sleeves down. No, but you put your sleeves down on the table, and then a speck of starch will go onto the table. Then you put your matzah there. Again, it is far fetched, but these are things which it's the custom to do, and we know we talk about the Arizal Hazot Nizam and Mashu Chametz. If somebody is careful even from the tiniest speck of chametz, it's a tremendous chus. Okay, so in Gemara and Shulchan Aruch, in classical sources, in the Gemara, it doesn't talk anything about. There's no obligation to clean for Pesach. The obligation is to bedikas chametz, to check for chametz. Why is there an obligation to check for chametz? So it goes like this: Minat Torah, on a biblical level, bittul chametz is enough. If you declare or any chametz that's left in your possession to be insignificant and more than just ownerless, insignificant. It's part of the text that we say in Kol Chamira that we declare anything that's left to be as the dust of the earth, right? So on a biblical level, that's enough. So you could no Pesach cleaning, no bedikas chametz, no nothing. Comes the time when Erev Pesach, you declare any chametz left insignificant, and you're done. Nevertheless, the Chachamim instituted that we do have to check and remove any chametz from our possession. Why do we have to remove chametz from our possession? So basically, there are two reasons, even though the two reasons are connected. But the two reasons are, first of all, we're concerned that perhaps your declaration of the chametz being insignificant won't be as sincere as it ought to be. And secondly, so you may declare it ownerless or an insignificant, but you might not actually mean that. And secondly, that even if you do declare it completely invalid, but then if you happen on Pesach to chance upon a good donut or a good bottle of whiskey, you might forget that this is, you might by mistake accidentally eat it. So because of those two reasons, the Chachamim said we have to get rid of any chametz from our possession. Now, anything that we sell to a goy, so the halacha is that if you sell it to a goy, you have to put a mechitza de asar tzvachim. You have to block it off, or if it's in a kitchen cabinet, you put a sign on it. You can even tie it closed. You put a sign, sold to a goy. In other words, you make it very clearly marked. This is sold to a goy, and that's it. You don't need to think twice about it. It's closed. It's done. Finished. Goodbye. We'll see. Hopefully next week, or this year, the sale. We're still going to have some chametz on Shabbos because you need to have chametz for the meal. But the sale to the goy is done before Shabbos. So we'll see how to apply that this year. But the general principle is anything that's sold to a goy is no problem. Now,
in the past, we always had available burning out here. And burning will be Friday morning, correct?
So the custom is to burn things on Friday morning, to burn it at the same time that you would if it were Erev Pesach. Right. But you don't actually, you still, even after the burning, you're still keeping chametz to at least enough for Lechem Mishnah. Okay, I'll mention, we're talking about it anyway, I'll mention it. Two tips. First of all, one tip that I've used in the past, has been quite a few years since Erev Pesach fell on Shabbos, is to use, instead of challah, to use pita bread, because pita bread is much less crummy than Pesach. You can also eat it outdoors and pour bleach over it afterwards, but you have to know how to do that because the halachas of eating a meal in two different places. We'll discuss that next week. another thing which you could do certainly for kids, if you're worried about kids making crumbs, is egg matzah. Even though the Ashkenazi custom is not to eat egg matzah on Pesach, but it doesn't mean we treat it like chametz. So if you want to give the kids egg matzah for the Shabbos meal, sorry. Oh, so egg matzah is mezainis, but it's not hamoitzi, which is why I'm not recommending it for adults. But you can certainly, first of all, for kids, I don't know if that you have to be machmir that they have hamoitzi for the Shabbos. And if you convey a sud on it, if you have, even for an adult, if you have if you have a good amount, I have to think exactly what the amount would be. But if you have a proper amount when you convey a sud, you make a meal over egg matzah, then that would be valid as well. And then you don't need to concern yourself with the crumbs because it's not chametz. It's kosher Pesach. It's customary that we don't eat it on Pesach, but we don't treat it like chametz. Now, so because the reason for bedika is that you might you have to get rid of chametz because you might come. 1 second. So Chazal said you have to get rid of chametz. How do you get rid of chametz? It's called bedika, checking for chametz. Now, because we are blessed with affluence and none of us live in one-room apartments, we live in houses, right? So we can't just show up on the night of chametz with a candle and get rid of chametz. It takes a process of cleaning for Pesach. So essentially, we have to look at the whole process of Pesach cleaning as being an extended bedikas chametz. And that will help us understand what things are we looking for, what things do we clean for, what things do we not clean for, what are we caring about. Also, as we'll see soon, it's recommended that you don't leave the entire bedikas chametz to the night of bedikas chametz. You have to do bedikas chametz that night, but that doesn't mean you have to leave your whole house to do that night. You could do your house in the weeks leading up to Pesach as you clean them to check them that day, as we'll see soon. Now, when you're looking for chametz, you're really looking for two things. You're looking either for a piece that's as big as a kazayis, or even something that's less than a kazayis, but that's something that's edible. If you find a pretzel, you might grab it and eat it, right? You're not looking for a crumb. Now, the custom is, as Yisrael Kedoshim, if you happen to see a crumb, then you take it away. But we're not here to look for crumbs of chametz. That's not what this is about. Now,
even if there is a crumb, it's okay.
Yes, again, the minhag is that if you see crumbs, you take them away, but we're not looking for crumbs.
So you don't have to. You don't have to.
Whether or not I'm not sure if you don't have to vacuum because it's a makom shemachnisim bechametz. There could be a chashash certainly if there's a carpet that there's actually a crouton in there, but you don't have to. Strictly speaking, you certainly don't have to sort of get into the basement couch into all the crevices. I don't know if there's any need for that. Some places it depends also. In other words, like this: the makom shemachnisim bechametz means any place where you might. Where it's reasonable to assume that you might go there in the middle of the meal while you're holding a piece of food, right? So I think it's unlikely that anybody goes into that boiler room in the middle of the meal. Like, that's not the place where you end up with a piece of bread in your hand. But but if you have kids go everywhere all the time. So it's not so unreasonable to say, oh, there's going to be a pretzel in the couch. So clean out the couch. But you don't need to go. Another very important principle is you don't anywhere beyond Sheyodi Magas, anywhere which you can't reach, you don't need to go to lengths to reach places. So, for example, there's absolutely no need or even minhag to pull out the oven or to pull out the fridge and clean behind it. What's behind the fridge and behind the oven, you can't. That's it. You can't reach. There's no need to clean that. However, if for whatever reason someone does choose to pull out the fridge to clean it, then you have to check it. So then you have to pull it out again on the night. Then you either have to pull it out again on the night of bedikas chametz to check it, or you have to check it according to the rules of bedikas chametz before you put it back. So let's review that. The typical bedikas chametz is that it has to be done at night and it has to be done to the light of a candle. Now, the halachas here are not very scientific. I don't know that they make a lot of sense, but we're not into it. We have to do what it says in the Shulchan Aruch. So, just a second. Okay, so the halacha is that the light of a candle only works for bedikas chametz at night, and it says even if you're in a pitch black room in a basement, 7 floors below ground, it doesn't matter. If it's daylight outside, bedikas chametz does not work to the light of a candle or a light. So bedikas chametz must be done at night. Now, it doesn't need to be done with a candle. It can be done with a flashlight. And nowadays, everybody has a flashlight on their phone, so that's a very big convenience. But it must be done at night. The exception is, b'shas adchak, it could be done by daylight. Now, here's one of the areas where we have a little bit of a difference between Rabbi Farkash and Rabbi Oberlander, but I'll convey it as I understand it. Because we all have big houses that we're Pesach cleaning and doing all these things, we consider it Shas Adchak, so we will allow you to do B'dikus Chametz to the daylight, to the sunlight. However, in order for that to apply, it needs to be two things. First of all, it needs to be Oyer, it needs to be a very bright place. So somewhere where you have direct light from a window, like that. In other words, not just bright from sunlight. So, for example, here in this room, where there's all these windows coming in, you have a lot of sunlight. It's very bright. But in the hallway, where there's no direct window light coming in, so then no, only by night, not by day. By day, you can't work with electric lights. Now the Shulchan Aruch says that you can't, that the sunlight only works if there's no glass. If there's glass, then that doesn't work. However, so here's where we get into the big machlokes achronim, and Rabbi Oberlander and Rabbi Farkash find themselves on two different sides of the fence over here, whether or not the contemporary glass, which seems to our eyes to be a very good conduit of the sunlight, it counts. Does it, when it says that you're not allowed to use glass without talking about the maybe stained glass or different old-fashioned glasses or not? Rabbi Oberlander is lenient about this, and he says that if there's plenty of light coming in, that's fine. But again, you can only check chametz to direct sunlight. So if you're pulling out, if for whatever reason you choose to pull out your fridge and oven to clean behind it, then what I would recommend is that if you have direct sunlight coming into that area, then you clean it, you check it thoroughly, and you put it back. That's fine. You've done your b'dikus chametz. If not, then you have to wait. And you don't want to pull it out again for the night of b'dikus chametz, then wait before you put it back. Wait until it's nighttime. Then go and check it with a flashlight, and then you can put it back and you're done. What?
Now that you pulled it out, why didn't you check? Why does that create a new obligation to check?
Because the poskim say that now it's because if within 30 days the reason you don't need to check it is because it's a makom she'ein magaz. It's a place that you can't reach. If within 30 days you've made it into a place that you can reach, so now it becomes obligated to check.
Just so I understand, the use of sunlight, you can check during the day as long as you're using sunlight. That means that all electric is turned off and you're only using sunlight?
I think so. I'm not sure about that. I don't know. Not necessarily. No, I don't think. No, probably not necessary.
Okay, but as long as sunlight is available in that whatever the room is.
Yeah. Okay.
But one thing is just like cars. Just tracking.
What was that? Let's do one thing. I'm gonna get. It's all on my notes. We'll get to cars in a minute. Now, behind the fridge, we did. One second. Now, Rabbi Farkash has a tremendous leniency, which he says the Alter Rebbe says this. I don't think the Alter Rebbe says it explicitly, although I do see where he gets it, where he implies it from, and certainly Rabbi Farkash is a very reliable source. He says that any flat surface that you've cleaned thoroughly, the cleaning itself renders it bedika. But that cleaning does not help for the nooks and crevices in the corners, right? So for example, you've moved out the fridge, you've washed the whole area thoroughly, right? Then you just take your flashlight, check in the corners and in the edges in the perimeter that there's no chametz, and it's done. You don't need to check the whole area. And what that means is on the night of b'dikus chametz, when you're going around the house, he says you don't need to sort of check every inch of under the table because you've already swept and mopped the floor under the table. That's good enough. But that only helps for the flat, open surfaces. It doesn't help for the nooks and crevices, which is why he says we see that most people spend the time on b'dikus chametz looking in the corners and the edges, not in the thing. So that's certainly a very helpful thing, again, especially nowadays that we all have big houses, etc. But either way, it is recommended, and this was the minhag of the Rebbe Rashab and many others, that we do not leave the whole b'dika to the last night. As you're going along, do the b'dika. Now, another important area of that is the fridge. Inside your fridge, and you were talking, Levi, about using cabinets for Pesach. Inside your fridge and inside your cabinet is a makom shemachnisa bechametz. It's a place which year-round is used to store chametz. So those places need bedika. You need to check them. Now, it's a bit, I don't know what the word is. It's like you're gonna Pesach clean it, cover it, do everything you do, put your Pesach food in there, and then on the night of B'dikas chametz, you're gonna stand there with a candle checking that there's no chametz there. I mean, obviously, right? So what is recommended is that whenever you choose to Pesach clean your fridge and your cabinets, the first thing you do before you put anything Pesach in there is you do b'dikas chametz. So again, if it has direct window light, that itself constitutes the b'dika. If not, then at nighttime you open the fridge, you have light in the fridge, or you use your flashlight and you check it before. Again, it doesn't to our human minds this might seem a bit of futile, but that's the halacha. You have to check it with the light to check that there's no chametz in there before, and then you start storing your Pesach food in there. One second, we'll get to covering soon. Another important element of b'dikas chametz of your fridge is to check any foods that you buy. Just because it's the kosher for Pesach aisle and jewel doesn't mean that somebody didn't make a mistake stacking the shelves and put something chametzik or kitnias, whatever, on the. You don't have to sell kitnias. It's perfectly legitimate to own kitnias, but just make sure everything you buy, check the labels that it's actually, not relying on the labor at jewel that it's kosher. Now, another thing is, okay, Akiva mentioned about cars. So cars also you have to do b'dikas chametz. Certainly, if you have kids, it's a makom shemachnisim bechametz. But again, you only have to check the ad makom sheyodim magas, the place that you could reach. So one place that you really have to do is okay. So the inside the car seats, there's always pretzels there, and the kid can very easily on Pesach stick his hands under there and get a pretzel and eat it. So you got to take out the car seat, empty it, make sure you the thing. But within the car seat, in the back, there's a crevice where you could see crumbs there, and you can't reach it. It's fine. If you can't reach it, it doesn't matter. The same is within the seats. You clean the pouches, you clean within the seats. You don't need to start lifting up the carpet and opening the thing where they keep the spare tire. And you don't need to buy any place which is not accessible, which you can't reach just by reaching it. You don't need to start taking apart your car to clean it. No, you're not just looking for kazayis. You're looking also for perurim, which are edible, like a pretzel or a crouton.
Okay, fine. But then let's say you have an open area. You don't do that. You just go like this. You look at your hand. And you just sweep like that. You go in the opening. You see, okay, is there anything there? No. Bam. Further. Why using vacuums and shampooing and stuff like that?
So shampoo. So again, all of those things are shampooing is certainly. The reason is like this, because if there's when it comes to eating, we go extreme. So the concern, I guess, would be that somebody is going to stick his hand into that pouch on Pesach, and there'll be a tiny crumb that will get stuck behind his nail, and then he's going to suck his thumb or his fingers, and that crumb will go into his nail. So by vacuuming and shampooing it, it's a chumrah and possibly even a borderline unnecessary chumrah, but certain thing. Now, one thing with shampooing and bleaching and all these things is that once you've given something chemicals, it gives it another level of not being edible. So if there's a hole where I'm not sure if this is considered, I could reach it, I can't reach it, and you get yourself tied in knots like I like to do. So what you do is you just pour bleach in it, and then even if it is chametz and even if it is technically considered something that you can reach, you pour bleach in it, it's good, and we'll see that's one of the ways to deal with chametz on Erev Pesach that falls on Shabbos, might be to pour bleach on it, because that's possibly. Rabbi Farkash doesn't even like the bleach. Okay, we'll talk about that more next week. Anyway, now besides Pesach cleaning your car, you have to do b'dikas chametz. Now the car b'dikas chametz is a very good example of something that's open to plenty of sunlight, and there you don't need to rely on the glass. You open the doors. So you don't need to do b'dikas chametz in your car at night. You can do b'dikas chametz during, certainly if you're pressed for time. Look, I should say, it's better to do it at night. And if you could do it, if you clean your car, again, not the night of b'dikas chametz. You clean your car, and then that night you go in there with your flashlight and you check. and it's okay. But if you want to do, Rabbi Farkas says you could rely on doing things nowadays. Everything's a Shas Chag. So open all the doors and just go through. Besides vacuuming it, then sort of visually check it afterwards that there's nothing left, and that's it. And of course, once you've done that, you have to be careful that no more chametz goes in there. So when you go on a family trip, make sure there's no chametz snacks. Don't take granola bars. Take applesauce. Yes.
Is there a blessing you have to say each time?
No. Oh, very important. Thank you for bringing that up. No, the blessing for b'dikas chametz you only say on the night of b'dikas chametz. So all of these b'dikas chametz that you're doing in the leading up days and weeks would be done without a bracha, but you must leave at least one section of your house that is a makom shemachnisim bechametz, so not your boiler room, but a legitimate place that requires b'dika to leave to do it on the night of b'dikas chametz. Although technically you could say that because we have the custom to put out the 10 pieces of bread, so then even if you just do the boiler room, you put in the bread and it becomes a makom shemachnisim bechametz. But we don't do that. We leave a room that actually needs b'dika. Leave your a section of your living room, a bedroom, whatever, to do the night before. It's also very important. We'll see this in more detail, but I should just mention it's very important to do b'dikas chametz as soon as the time of b'dikas chametz, as soon as it's nightfall, and that night this year it's going to be Thursday night. You have to do it right away. And the Shulchan Aruch says that if you don't do it right away, you are an avarian. It's a strong Lashon which the Shulchan Aruch doesn't use easily. That you are a transgressor. Now there is a special dispensation given to daven Ma'ariv first, because we don't want to make people come to shul for mincha, go home and come back for Ma'ariv. But straight after Ma'ariv, you go home and don't do anything else before you check for chametz. And if you're not davening Ma'ariv with a minyan, then make sure to schedule your day that you're going to be available at that moment to do b'dikas chametz.
I work till 10, 11.
So if you're going to work till 10, 11 that night, then that's a problem. Then you have to make a shliach to do it for you. You shouldn't leave the b'dikas chametz till then. You should have a shliach. Again, most of the b'dika, you don't need to burden your family members with a big job. You could do most of the b'dika any night before, and leave one room to do that night and make a shliach to do it for you. And it could be anyone over bar and bas mitzvah can do it. Now, when it comes to one more important thing when it comes to a few more important things when it comes to b'dikas chametz. Now, Shulchan Aruch talks about pockets, checking your pockets. Now, back in the day when people had whatever, it wasn't a big deal. But now everybody has loads of clothes. You change at least once a day for most part. So checking chametz for the pockets can become burdensome. So a few things. First of all, anything that you're not planning to wear on Pesach, and I should mention, certainly for adults, one should wear Shabbos clothes for the entirety of Pesach, including Chol HaMoed. It's part of the respect of Chol HaMoed to wear Shabbos clothes. If you could wear a white shirt, a kapata, whatever your standard of Shabbos clothes are, but that's appropriate for Chol HaMoed. But if you have any clothes that you're not going to wear on Pesach, you just include them in the sale, and that is fine. Now, some poskim are lenient nowadays about checking for the clothes pockets, because they say, look, you wash everything with detergent. The detergent disqualifies it from being edible, and therefore you don't need to worry about it. However, it doesn't seem to be the accepted opinion. Neither Rabbi Farkas or Oberlander just take that blanketly. I think there's a few reasons. First of all, it's not clear that it actually disqualifies it even from animal consumption. And that once, if you were to have a pretzel in your pocket which got some tine in it and it dried out and a dog would find it, I don't know that a dog would be repulsed from eating it or even dangerous. And nowadays a lot of people use healthier chemicals that may not even be poison or whatever. So we have to what?
Most food has wrappers.
Yeah.
Most likely you keep in your pocket, it applies wrapper.
Well, it depends. For kids, you can often find actual crumbs and stuff. And for adults, you usually find food wrappers or chocolate, but chocolate's not chametz. So basically like this, the best thing to do for the pockets is, again, to get into this is what I try to do at my house, already from a few weeks before Pesach, to get into the habit of, before you do put the clothes into the washing machine, empty out the pockets and check if you have sunlight in your laundry room. That's the best. If you don't, then it would have to be at night. It would be a bit more challenging. But if you have sunlight in your laundry room, then take it to the window and check that there's no crumbs left in the pockets. And then if you're doing that consistently for a few weeks before Pesach, then I'm talking in my case instance where you have kids who, right? So chances are, if you start doing it now, by the time Pesach comes, you will have checked all of their clothing that they're going to wear on Pesach. For yourself, also make sure it doesn't have to be the day of. It could be a few days before. Make yourself a time to take any clothes that you might wear on Pesach and check all the pockets. It's also relevant to coats or other pockets, anything that doesn't just go routinely into the washing machine, to make sure you check the pockets. Also, of course, we mentioned car seats. Strollers can often have in different pouches in different areas. Food, toys. Especially, either put them. Toys is something which is a makom shemachnis b'chametz. Kids go in the middle of the meal and start playing with the Legos, with the Mega Box, with the Magnetiles. You could have separate toys. You could have Pesach toys. That's one thing. Books, kids' books, also full of crumbs. Don't put them away for Pesach. It's not really practical to Pesach clean books. Your own Sfarim. Okay, I'm running around over here. But toys are also, many toys are easy to Pesach clean. Legos you could just put into the washing machine run or put them in the bathtub with bleach, and that's it.
These are all chumras, you're saying?
No, well,
What's the reason?
no, I don't think it's a chumrah. I think because Legos is a makom shemachnis b'chametz.
Yeah, but you see that there's no Lego's a box.
Yeah.
So you just see.
Well, there could be a piece of food inside the Lego.
Let's say magnetite. You just see the box. You see there's nothing.
Magnetile, you have to check each piece. There could be pieces of chametz stuck to it.
That are designed.
Not because that's not edible. Okay, I don't know if you could have an edible piece of chametz stuck to a magnetile. Maybe not, but certainly you could in a Lego. It's very. You've never found a crouton. You've never found the Lego inside you never found a crouton inside a Lego piece. It happens all the time. Nothing to do with Pesach. You're playing with a Lego. There's a crouton. There's a cashew nut. There's a lot of the things are not chametz, but they could be chametz. It's a makom. Again, the Mishnah says that even a cellar, which once in a while the shamash might have gone into when you ran out of wine in the middle of the meal, your wine cellar is considered a makom shemachnis b'chametz, right? So Lego is certainly a makom shemachnis b'chametz. And again, some things you could debate whether it's a chumrah or a halacha, but I think this is, as far as the spectrum of chumras grow, I think Pesach cleaning Lego is a very legitimate one. Again, either put it away for Pesach or clean it. Should also mention, by the way, when it comes to chemicals or whatever in the laundry room, you don't need to worry about that. That's not considered edible. Tide, all of that stuff is fine. The only thing you have to be careful about in the laundry room is vinegar. White vinegar that some people use sometimes for cleaning. So sometimes it's kitniya, sometimes it's chametz, but from my recollection from previous years, it's very difficult to determine whether any given white vinegar is made from chametz, and basically put away unless it has a hechsher for Pesach, put it away. Sell it with the thing. Vitamins, also a lot of vitamins have chametz. You should check out your vitamins. Medications, first of all, the main thing I have to say about medications is don't wait till last minute to ask the Rav. If you have medication that you're going to need to take on Pesach, look into it ahead of time, find out what the status is, and speak to the Rav so we don't scramble last minute to find out. It's less common for medicine to have chametz. What?
You go with the CRC policy or
What's
the
the
CRC just has two paragraphs. It says everything that's true with that's not liquid is mutter basically. All shampoos are mutter.
shampoo? Certainly is fine.
No, all these things that are.
Okay, so I'll get to two in a second.
Or do we have to go buy a book and look at every single item and see?
So again, I don't want to say something sort of a generic rule. If you have medications that you're going to have to take, look into it. Vitamins are usually not as important as medications, and they do often contain chametz, and even more often they contain kidneys. So vitamins are more a good thing. Now, cosmetics, so it depends what. Some things are completely possible achilas kalev. However, I've forgotten the exact word for this. I looked into this last year a little bit. There's a certain process where they, in the chemical, where they make something that it's not edible right now, but it is an undoable process. It can be undone. Last year, this was a big thing when it came to the hand sanitizers, if it's considered edible or not. The bottom line is, again, ideally, it's certainly recommended to be machmir. It comes up in because shampoos. I'm not worried about shampoos. Shampoos are totally fine, but like hand sanitizers, especially because hand sanitizers are something which would come in contact with food, right? You eat from your hands, so that's something to be more careful about. Cosmetics, there's different customs. Some women wear anything. Some women only wear the cosmetics which you find in the list to be kosher, but certainly cosmetics which come in contact with food, so nail polish, lipstick, any of those things, certainly recommended to toothpaste. Certainly recommended to buy something with hechsher, even year round. There's a debate about toothpaste, but even year round nowadays, there's so many. You could get with a hechsher. You can get Tom's of Maine. There's plenty of opportunity to get toothpaste with a hechsher year round. It's not a chumrah that costs a lot of money or effort, so it's certainly recommended.
All the gelatin I searched is all the gelatin is not from animals in any toothpaste or Colgate.
I recently saw something from the OU. I'm not from. Yeah, okay. I'm not familiar with the ins and outs. There's toothpaste with extra out there. Why not? Like it doesn't discuss anything else. What? Okay. Why is it grow? You could get Colgate with the extra. You could get Orbit with the extra around Pesach. Some people buy now for the year. You buy now. You go to the thing. You buy Colgate with the extra, and you use it year round. I mean, I personally, whatever. I use Tom's of Maine year round, and it has an OU on it, and it doesn't taste the same as any other toothpaste. Sorry?
Medication, Rabbi Schuster and Shabbos say that sometimes you have to wrap it in paper.
Oh, so some medications are things which are achshash. So Rabbi Schuster used to say to wrap it in paper, but nowadays there's a much better idea. You could buy, I don't know if Jewel have it, or you could buy it online, or the kosher vitamin companies, Maxi, whatever, they sell empty capsules. So if you have a medication that's uncertain, that's unclear, instead of wrapping it in tissue paper, you could just put it into this empty capsule and swallow it that way. So that's another thing. Now, another big issue on Pesach, which here in Chicago we're fortunate, at least in the city, not in the suburbs, I'm not sure, but here in Chicago we're fortunate not to have to deal with, is garbage pails. Here in Chicago, the garbage pails, A, do not belong to the individual, they belong to the city, and B, they're not on our property, they're in the alley. So it's no problem. If you don't have both of those conditions met, like in the suburbs, a lot of times you keep the pails on your property, and then whatever day of the week you take it out, then you have to be careful. But here in the city, it's not an issue at all. Another thing, what? Yeah, there's also the Aguda pickup of the garbage. You could look on the bulletin board. There's also the Aguda have a 2 or 3 dates that you could go if you want to. They have like a Koshering facility where you could bring your stuff that you want. I mean, you can't bring your countertops, but if you have cutlery or whatever that you want to kosher, you could bring it there. Another thing to always keep in mind to be careful to clean out before Shabbos this year is vacuum bags or vacuum cleaners. Make sure you empty them. There could be a piece of chametz in there. In that case, there could even be a kazayis. So certainly take it out. Now, where are we? Okay. Every year we have another thing to do with preparing for Pesach, and Erev Pesach is leading into the Koshering thing, although we have a few more other things to talk about, is fillings. So obviously your body doesn't absorb chametz, right? You could touch meat and then touch milk. It doesn't absorb food, but if you have foreign body in your mouth, fillings, so then so year round we're lenient. We don't say that you have to kasher your mouth anytime between you eat milchik and fleshik. But it is customary to do some sort of koshering of your mouth before Pesach. So basically, for 24 hours, don't have anything hot or anything hot. It could be warm, not hot, and don't have anything sharp, like which actually becomes relevant because if you're fasting, this year it's a bit different because the fast of the firstborn is pushed back. But if you're fasting for the firstborn fast and then you break your fast at the siyum and you say l'chaim on vodka, so vodka is usually kidney, it's not chametz, but whatever, yeah. If you say l'chaim on whiskey, then that the truth is either way, it's a sharp thing. Anyway, the bottom line is you should clean out your mouth thoroughly, floss the whole thing, and then drink some hot water, as hot as you can. Don't burn yourself, but basically as hot as you can manage. Drink so it sort of the hot water comes as much as possible in contact with your fillings. That's the customary thing to do. Now, going back to preparing the kitchen for Pesach and things that you can touch. So around the dining room, kitchen area, that's where we want to really scrub the chairs. That's the chumrah, anything which could come in contact with food. So a few things. One thing that's very important to clean thoroughly is if you don't have a Pesach kitchen, is the knobs of your stove. The knobs that become dirty and greasy, clean them very well. Now, back to he asked before about the fridge, you asked about the cabinets. So it's customary, again, this is not strictly speaking required, but it is customary that anything that comes in contact with food, we're extra careful, so we cover it. So that's why it's customary to cover the shelves in the fridge. And if you're going to be using your kitchen shelves for Pesach dishes, besides cleaning it out and doing b'dikas chametz, it's customary to cover them with paper, with silver foil, with plastic, whatever it is. Now, for the knobs of your stove, clean them very well, and cover them with silver foil. Or you can do what I did last year, very cheap on Amazon, just buy replacement knobs and use different knobs for Pesach. Another thing that's very important, which you don't find so much in this forum because it's a recent phenomena, but in my opinion, very important, cell phones. Cell phones are the most chametz thing you could possibly imagine. We don't go anywhere without our cell phones. We eat meals, we have the middle of eating chametz, you have a cell phone case you don't want that near your Pesach food. So what a lot of rabbis recommend, and I already have it in my Amazon cart, before Pesach, buy a new case for your phone, for your cell phone, and once you kasher over your kitchen to Pesach, so for Pesach, you switch over your phone to the new case, and that's fine. And then make sure those few days where you're sort of having Pesach thick in the kitchen, but you're still going out to eat pizza, make sure that when you're eating your pizza, you're nowhere near your phone, and wash your hands off thoroughly before you touch your phone, and that's fine. I mean, otherwise, to start making sure the whole time Pesach your phone is never going to come near the kitchen and never near the food is not very reasonable. And I think if we're machmir to cover the shelves in the fridge, this is certainly a much more it's more concern to have your phone come in contact with food than the shelves in your fridge, which you could see everything and clean properly. So that's something to recommend. Now, another thing which comes in is the underneath the knobs. Underneath the knobs of your stove, there's always going to be schmutz over there, chametz. Now, again, remember, anything that you can't reach doesn't matter. So you clean out with a toothpick, whatever you could reach. If you want to feel really good, you can spray some Easy Off over there to make it, anything that's left is chemicalized, and that's it. You don't need to worry about that. We also have the minhag on Pesach not to eat anything that fell on the floor, and some people have even a minhag not to use anything that fell on the floor. So if a fork or a knife fell on the floor, you won't use it. Is that your minhag? How do you do it? Like, what do you do if a towel falls on the floor? You don't use it, or only utensils?
Primarily utensils.
Right. Okay, so exactly how you do or don't apply that minhag, I guess, goes family by family. It's mentioned in Shulchan Aruch customary to have a new tablecloth for Pesach. Again, not strictly required, but it is customary. It's certainly if you're going to use plastic tablecloths to cover it, it's even less required. Again, whatever your comfort level is. Towels and dishcloth also, we have washing machines, you wash them. It's not strictly necessary to have new ones for Pesach, but I believe many people do have the custom to do so. One second.
Getting back to clothes,
Yes.
pockets I understand because you're gonna have contact, your hands are gonna be in your pocket. How about those men who have cuffs on their trousers? Is it mandatory to empty out the cuffs even though you're not gonna have contact?
I don't think it's mandatory, but I do believe it's customary. Although it's becoming out of custom because nobody wears such pants anymore, but certainly if you have, the cuffs on the bottom of the pants, I think it's the custom thing. Okay, we'll talk more about Erev Pesach next time in Meretz Hashem. Now, just a little bit about koshering the kitchen for Pesach. So, the basic principle when it comes to utensils. First of all, if there's any questions about preparing the kitchen for Pesach, ask. I'll do my best to address it. But the basic principle is with utensils, Chinaware we don't kosher, glass we don't kosher. So basically, as far as we're concerned, the things that you could kosher are forks, knives, cutlery, and a becher if you want to kosher a becher. Or something like that. Anything which has crevices that you can't clean out properly, we don't kosher. So, for example, sharp knives that have, certainly the ones that have wooden handles which are attached to the blade, you don't kosher those. If I recall correctly, the poskim say that the ones which are more common nowadays with plastic handles, those don't have any crevices, so those you can kasher. Now, it's customary, although not necessary, to have a separate pot that you only use for kashering. You don't use, so you could either have a kashering pot. If you don't have a kashering pot, what you could do is, before you use the pot to kasher within it, you could kasher the pot. So you bring the pot to a boil, and then you throw in it an Evan Meluban. Now, an Evan Meluban, we're going to use this for a number of things, but you basically want to throw something boiling hot into the water to overflow it so that it kashers the sides of the pot and makes a big mess all over your kitchen. So one thing you could use for that part of it is you could even take a spoon or a hammer, put the end of the hammer, the metal part of the hammer onto a fire for a few minutes so it gets red hot, so it gets hot. And then if the pot is to a boil and it's almost full and you throw the hammer in, that will sort of bubble up the whole thing over the top. And then you have a pot that's technically your koshering pot, and you use that. Now, when you dip the forks and knives or whatever into it, you have to make sure that it actually is, you should do one at a time. You don't want everything to be touching each other. You can do maybe a few at a time, but it does say, I'm not sure exactly how you could do this with doing a few at a time. Maybe you can, But you have to make sure that the water is actually actively bubbling while the thing is in it. So when you stick the fork in, you use a net or whatever it is, but the fork is not hot, so it cools down the water, it brings the boil down, so you have to wait until it comes back to a boil, which is why if you are going to kasher such things like forks, knives, spoons, my personal recommendation would be don't bother with a mess in your house. Just look on the thing, take it to wherever it is, the koshering station. They have these huge vats which are very, very hot, and they're professional, they have a lot of experience, they just do it for you, and it's one less thing that you have to hassle with. But again, it's just a preference. Whichever way works for you is fine. But koshering countertops and sinks, again, if you don't have a Pesach kitchen, is something we all have to do. So do not pour hot water and kasher your fridge. It's going to ruin your fridge and the warranty will be invalidated. And now for so like this, an oven, the truth is that we don't recommend, if possible, you should have a separate oven for Pesach, even though we rely on a self-clean oven to kasher it year round. If you for Pesach, it's certainly better to be machmir for a number of reasons. Either because it's not really kabbalah kachpolte, there's no actual fire, or because there's a glass door, whatever. If you don't have a separate Pesach oven, then if you have a self-clean oven, you can kasher it. You put it in a full self-clean cycle, and you should cover the door with silver foil, with 2 layers of silver foil around. Make sure the whole door, that part is very difficult to kasher, so make sure that part is all covered with 2 layers of silver foil taped around the front, and then that's fine. If you have a non-self-clean oven, then that's very difficult to properly kasher for Pesach, because a blowtorch is not really an option, because we're concerned you won't do it properly, because you'll be legitimately afraid that you're going to ruin the oven. And anything that we're scared you might not do because you might be afraid, so we say you just can't do it, it doesn't work. So again, better to have another oven for Pesach. I know some people have been said to manage without any oven for Pesach, just doing everything over the fire. That's another way, if that's a thing. Now for the stovetop, if you have a gas, there's basically, as far as I can know, 3 types of stovetops. You have a gas stovetop, you could have the electric stovetop with the coils, or you could have an electric stovetop with sort of like a glass flat thing. So for the electric stovetop with the coils, for that one, you want to make sure to, now, I don't know, I certainly don't want to take any responsibility for people pouring hot water on the stovetop. I don't know where that water could go, if it could ruin the electricity, if it's plugged in or unplugged. But you could, for the electric, the truth is, if you're using electric stovetops with the coil, it's really very inexpensive to buy portable ones for Pesach and just keep them separate for Pesach. That's certainly recommended, although you can kasher it by leaving the coils on for a long time, for like 2 hours. That would burn out anything that's in there. And then you cover the bottom with silver foil, and you make sure any food that would spill over on Pesach onto the bottom, you don't put it back in the pot, you just throw it out. The same goes for a gas stovetop, that the stovetop itself, if you can pour some water on it safely, I'm not sure, but if you cover it with silver foil and you make sure that anything, well, I guess 2 options. Either you cover it with a double layer of silver foil, and then if food falls in it, you can pick it, if you're scrambling eggs and a piece falls out, you can pick it up and put it back in the pan. or just cover it, and anything that falls out over there, don't worry about it. The disc that's on the stove, on the fire, once you run the stove for whatever, 20 minutes, half an hour, then that's considered kosher. You don't need to worry about that. It's not coming in direct contact with the pot or the food, so that's really of little concern. The grates on which the pot rests, that's the part where it's questionable whether or not kosher works for, and therefore if you can if you can buy a new one for Pesach, that's certainly recommended. I was fortunate enough to be able to do that last year, and they even sent me a spare piece with it. So not only do I have spare grates for Pesach, I even have a trivet to use on my countertop. But if you can't do that, then the way to kasher those, the best way is take a 9x13 pan, put it upside down over the fire, run the fire for 10-15 minutes, and any part that was under the pan during those 10-15 minutes is considered kosher. It might smell a little bit from burning the pan, but it's not dangerous. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, if you have the electric, sort of the modern electric stoves, which is just like a sheet of glass where you have these 4 spots that get hot, those are very difficult to kosher properly. The only, you can't really put, there is a video online, if anybody's interested, I can send it to you, from the COR, from the Canadian Rabbinical Council, where they have a whole sort of sophisticated way how to cut out the holes of silver foil and kasher it. I guess it technically is doable, but it's difficult. So okay. Also, you should cover, ideally even with 2 layers of silver foil, the top, the fan or whatever is on top of your stove top, because the steam goes up, the steam goes down, things drip. Better safe than sorry. Now, when you're kashering your countertops, so there's different customs, exactly what to do, but basically, technically, if you use an oven meluban, which means that you pour the hot water over the countertop and make sure every spot of the countertop, but you pour it over the stone. So one way to do it, this is what I do, is that you could buy the koshering stone, which is basically a cage with a big brick and a long handle, and it comes with gloves that reach all the way up to your elbows, so you're safe. And you leave that brick on the fire for 20 minutes or so, and then you boil up the kettle. And again, recommended that you use a kettle that's just used for koshering purposes, if possible. And then you pour the water over every spot of the counter, but over the stone. So then it sort of gets a brand new sizzle as it gets onto the counter. However, so you do that for your whole counter space. When you do that, you should also do that for your backsplash, because pots could touch the backsplash, things could splash in the backsplash. That's why it's called a splash. So you should kasher that as well. The truth is, the backsplash you don't need to kasher with the stone, because the reason you need the stone is because in case you have any hot solids, like a piece of challah out of the oven onto your countertop. But if you have, but there's not going to be any hot challah on your backsplash. It's just a concern that something splashed over there. Now, technically, if you kasher everything like that with an oven meluban, you don't need to cover anything. That's considered kasher. However, it is customary to cover it, and it's even customary some people have the custom to cover it with a double layer. Now, technically, if you're covering it with a double layer, so not the thin silver foil, but either a thick plastic or a thin silver foil and then a thick plastic, or sometimes you could find here around Pesach time the heavy-duty thick aluminum foil. So technically, if you're double covering it, you don't need to kasher it at all, because the principle is that no taste will go without any liquid. So if you have a double layer, there's no liquid in between, it doesn't transmit. However, like we said, we do everything crazy when it comes to the food area. So some people kasher it with a stone and double cover. Some people kasher it without a stone and double cover. Some people kasher it with a stone and do a single cover. All of those options are perfectly legitimate. Now, the sink. So first of all, before you kasher your sink, you want to before you kasher anything, the countertop or the sink, you want to make sure it's 100% dry, because if there's any water there, that will cool down the hot water that you're pouring on it. Some people want to be lenient to kasher with a steaming machine, which is made to remove wallpaper, but it's not recommended. Certainly the Chabad Rabbanim not comfortable with that. It has to be water. We don't even kasher with any other liquid other than water, ideally. So that, and also it's customary after you finish koshering to pour some cold water over it. Okay, for the sink, so before you kasher the sink, you want the concern is that there might be some chametz, some actual, not absorption of chametz, but actual chametz stuck in the drain somewhere. And then, steam, it could get clogged up on Pesach or whatever. So before you kasher the sink, take some very strong chemical, Mr. Plumber or something like that, that's made to unclog drains, pour it down, so in case there's any chametz there, you've taken care of it. Then you you kasher the sink. So there's two ways. The best way to kasher the sink is, like I said, with the Evan Meluban, with a stone. So you start in the bottom. First you do the base of the sink, and then you do the walls of the sink. Technically, you could kasher a sink with a blowtorch as well, and hold the blowtorch on each area of the sink until the corresponding area on the other side of the metal sheet becomes yatzula. This way becomes very hot. The reason why that's not so recommended is because, first of all, around the drain there could be some plastic or rubbery things that will get burnt, and also on the top of the sink you have the sealer, the caulk, that could get ruined from the fire. So if you were in the mood of caulking the sink again yourself, that's fine. But otherwise, probably better to do it with hot water. Now, technically, once you've done that properly, you don't even need to cover your sink on Pesach. Or if you do it without a stone and just pour hot water and cover the sink, that's fine. But nevertheless, it is customary to cover the sink, to have a sink insert, and you could buy all the different sizes sink inserts at Hungarian. Last year they had some of the sizes at Jewel. And by the way, if you ever can't find anything or whatever, nowadays look on Amazon. There's so many things you could buy actually. It was often an issue to get glasses for the Seder, for the 4 cups, because we don't use plastic. I saw on Amazon 16 4-ounce glasses for $16. Nowadays Amazon is certainly a great resource for these type of things. We spoke before about the knobs, the phone cases. Lots of these things are sink inserts. A lot of them are very easy to find on Amazon. Now, the tap and the hose and all of that stuff, you want to make sure to clean very thoroughly, and then you pour hot water on it. For the head of the tap, you might even be able to dip it into the hot water or pour either way, as long as the hot water gets directly from the kettle everywhere. You don't need to bother with the stone as far as that is concerned. On the hose, pull out the hose. Well, so the thing is with the hose like this. You also pull out the hose and pour hot water over it. However, on the one hand, you don't need to use the stone for the sink and for the tap and all that stuff. On the other hand, you really have to clean it thoroughly. And sometimes there's buttons, where you switch between the power hose, the sprinkler hose, and you get with a toothpick behind all of that. Can be tough. So make sure you clean it out very well. It's recommended that you change the change the aerator. Just buy Home Depot or Amazon a new aerator, and it's probably not going to fit, and it's going to break and whatever. Now the truth is that, so what I ended up doing last year, actually, some people have a custom to cover the faucet with a cloth on Pesach. So just in case there's any, somebody threw a piece of bread into the reservoir and a crumb came through, it's going to get blocked by the cloth. Now, if replacing the aerator is tough, it doesn't work for you. If you just pop out the aerator, and instead of putting a new aerator, you could just put a cloth and tie it, and that, if you don't have any aerator or cloth, the water's going to come shooting out. It's not going to be convenient to use. But if you have a cloth over it, that sort of spreads it out, and it becomes very usable water. Yeah, very good. The keyboard of a computer is another place where there's going to be lots of crumbs and things. So first of all, there's a spray you could buy. It's actually it's made for computers. You sell it at Office Depot, where it sort of just sprays out air, and you run it over your whole keyboard, and any crumbs that are there will come out. Again, you don't need to start removing the keys and taking crumbs from underneath, because that's a place that you can't reach. But anything on the surface, well, that's the easiest way to do. I don't recommend using that spray for the stuff underneath your knobs because it's flammable. But you can use that for your computer. And I don't think it would be unreasonable to say that on Pesach, after you've used the computer, wash your hands before you touch food. That would make sense to me. Okay, any other questions before we continue? Any place that you're going to be like, for example, I have a machine on Pesach that you use to, like a deep fryer, to make French fries. So the area on top of that, cover with a double layer of silver foil, because the steam goes up, comes down. Who knows what you had there during the year? So cover everything with a double layer. Technically, anything that's covered with a double layer is sort of nothing. Yeah.
If you're going, say, to a hotel for Pesach, or going to a friend's family, or renting an Airbnb for Pesach, whatever, obviously you don't own any of those things. But if you're getting there morning of Pesach, okay, it's past checking for the components, do you still have an obligation?
Yeah, so if you're renting a hotel room or an Airbnb or even a car, renting a car, even though the rental company do clean it out, but they only clean out the places that you're going to see at face value. I don't know that the rental company are going to clean out the pouch where somebody might have left, So if you're renting a car or anything, whether it's on the Friday of Erev Pesach or whether it's on Chol Hamoed, before you unpack or before you drive off in the car, you should do B'dikas Chametz. Yeah. If you rent a car on Chol Hamoed or whatever, you should check it.
Even if you don't own it.
Yes. Okay. There are some rabbis who are lenient, but that's Rabbi Obelander says that's what. Yeah.
If you're going away for Pesach, where do you do this one?
Oh, so if you're going away for Pesach, so again, there's different shittas, but my understanding of the way Chabad Poskim rule is that you just sell your house completely, and nobody goes chametz in your house over here. Again, if you're going to be away for the entirety of Pesach, if you're coming back on Chol, that doesn't work. But where you're going, let's say if you're going to stay by your parents, you do b'dikas chametz just in your room. You have your own separate 10 pieces of bread. The rooms that your family are occupying, you do b'dikas chametz. Some poskim say that you should give $1 to your father to rent it out, so it becomes yours. If I recall correctly, Reb Chaim Shalom Deitch says that according to Alter Rebbe, that's not necessary, but give your father $1 in case you don't want to rely on my memory. That's fine too. And you have your own separate 10 pieces, and that's how you get to the minhag. And then you could also, if your father does it the way we does it, that he splits up the work over the weeks leading up, that's fine. But if you want to al skibudav help your father do the whole house as his shliach,
My brother's
whatever your brother, if you want to help him and be his shliach, that's also a thing. But your own chiyuv b'dika you do with your own room, and because you have your own 10 pieces, so it's a makom shemachnis bechametz.
So even if it's Friday, you still do it?
Yeah, if it's Friday, you do it without. Sorry, I should clarify. If you're doing it on Friday or on Chol Hamoed without a bracha, I'm fairly certain that's without a bracha, and you don't put out 10 pieces of bread or anything like that. You no, but I'm saying on Friday, you just make sure to check all the drawers and check all the areas in the hotel. You get as much window, open the curtains, make sure you have as much window light as possible, and check it. And if you're able to get to the hotel the night before and check it with a candle, that's even better. Okay, we'll continue next week in Mitzvah Hashem with the halachas as they pertain to the special circumstance of this year and preparing for the Seder.
Recording now?